My name is Magnus Rylander. I am product manager at working with Spotfire. And I have with me also Bruno Souleres, also from TIBCO, who will take care of the demo part of this session. Okay. Right, the usual disclaimer. So we start by having kind of a brief review of Spotfire and analytic apps to provide some context. But then we take a little deeper dive into Spotfire Mods and what are the key features for the different user roles. Then we look at a couple of example of the community mods, which is a collection of free downloadable visualization for different use cases. And then we have a demo where you'll see how Bruno will walk you through how to create a custom visualization to solve a particular analytical problem. So let's start to look at Spotfire. Spotfire is a full spectrum analytical platform. So not only ad hoc data exploration with visual analytics, but it also has AI and machine learning capabilities. You can do dashboarding, reporting, and even mobile BI. And you can use Spotfire to build analytic applications for different domains and use cases. And you can even embed Spotfire content into other web applications. And all of this, you can use any data from your favorite data source. And this can be data that you bring into Spotfire and using Spotfire's in-memory data engine, but you can also have Spotfire have the data remain in the databases and have Spotfire do live queries to those, and you can even have real-time streaming data. Analytic applications. So the purpose of creating applications is to provide the business users a better analytic experience that is more streamlined for their domain and their use cases. And we believe that is much quicker and cost effective to build an app on an existing analytical platform. And we've seen a lot of domain-specific applications built on Spotfire by our partners and customers in many different industries, such as life science, semiconductor, energy, finance, to name a few. And by using Spotfire's real-time data capabilities, you can build analytic applications for operational use cases. So a couple of examples we've seen recently are airport ground staff management or wind turbine park management. So a core feature of an analytic applications is our visualizations. And we see a constant demand for having new type of visualizations in Spotfire. And we also see more and more open source JavaScript visualization libraries and different code samples out there on the internet. So maybe you come across the term mods from the gaming community, where developers have been able to customize their favorite video game by adding new characters or new features to the game. So we try to translate that concept into the world of analytics. So we recently introduced the Spotfire Mods framework. So it's a new JavaScript extension framework for Spotfire that makes you create custom visualizations that uses the power of Spotfire. And it's a lightweight cloud-enabled framework that makes it easy for developers to create new visualization and for anyone to use those visualization mods in their Spotfire analytic apps. So let's have a look at the different key features for different user rules. So first of all, it's very easy to distribute and deploy mods. You just download a mod file from a website and drop it to your Spotfire analysis, and then you can start using that right away, connected to your data. You need to, there is a built-in security mechanism based on code signing certificates. You need to make a trust decision the first time you use a new mod. And in use, a visualization mod works just like native Spotfire visualization. You can configure it with, drag and drop and point and click UIs. So, for instance, there are those standard axis selectors you use in Spotfire to connect to the data. You have the legend, properties panel, and then you can interact with a mod. So you're doing some filtering on the data. The mod will automatically redraw itself to reflect that data change. And you can mark and highlight within the visualization to look at different details, and also have brush linking so that all other visualizations on the page will kind of communicate with each other. So the developer experience. So a mod is conceptually a small web application that is running inside Spotfire in a sandboxed iframe. So as such, it is developed with common web technologies, JavaScript, HTML, CSS. The API is based on TypeScript and gives you access to the data in Spotfire and lots of other components that you need to access from your mod. You can typically integrate an existing visualization that is done with, for example, D3 or Plotly, or you can integrate any other chart library or JavaScript library within your mod. The development environment is fairly simple. You use a standard code editor like Visual Studio Code. You have Node.js for having a web development server, and then you have a Spotfire client for testing and debugging your mod. So you have a live preview in that client. Just shortly about the admin experience. So the core feature of this framework is that it is self-service, so that the user can deploy mods for themselves, and it's made so that it's secure even in a multi-tenant cloud environment. But the framework also allows admins to have central governance of mods, to have full control how mods are deployed and used in their organizations. So we have these community mods, which we are constantly adding more visualizations to. These can be downloaded for free and be used. And we also share source code projects on our GitHub repository. So those can be used as templates for mod development. So let's have a look at a couple of examples. So this first one is the animated bubble chart. It animates values over time by showing movement within a two-dimensional space. And I assure you, you remember Hans Rosling's famous TED Talk. They used this method to show changes in global health and economics. So in this example, we are seeing COVID vaccinations versus new cases for different countries in the world. And bubbles that are moving to the left represents countries where COVID-19 cases are decreasing. Bubbles moving up the charts represents countries that are vaccinating a high proportion of the population. And it's very easy to spot, I mean, which countries are kind of doing better than others when fighting this pandemic, and why that is. Okay. The second example I want to show you is the network chart. So it visualizes relationships and connection between data points. So let's look at this application built with a network chart. Yeah, so in this app, we see opioid transaction in the United States. And each line in the chart represents a buyer-seller relation. So the sellers that they are reporting transactions, and they are indicated by each central node, while the buyers are the surrounding nodes. Buyers clustered without the central node purchase from multiple sellers. So this is a rather extreme usage of the network graph. It kind of pushes the limit of how much data points a mod are able to render. I mean, remember, this is a client rendered visualization. So in this case, we have 18 million rows. Yeah, kind of beautiful when it evolves. All right, let's pause that. And now let's go and see how this can be done in practice. So over to you, Bruno.
Thanks, Magnus. Hi, everyone. I think I need you to stop sharing. Magnus, before.
Okay.
One good way of analyzing this kind of data would be to use a network graph, as the one Magnus just showed. And until recently, you didn't have such a visualization in Spotfire. But now this has become possible with the mods framework, and there is already a network chart available in the community for you to use. So in this demo, we are going to create one as a really simple network chart. So there are multiple libraries that exist in the market when you want to create a network graph. And the one I chose is Cytoskip.js because it's really powerful and really simple to use at the same time. So you have in this, if you go to their websites, js.cytoskip.org, you will have multiple examples and also a good documentation with easy steps to start creating your own network graph. The data that I'm going to use for this demo is data that describes flights and airports in the US. And there are multiple columns in the data table that I'm going to use. First one I want to talk about is the type column, because my data is mixing information regarding airports and also flights. And I have this type column that helps me distinguish between the two. And then I have, of course, for each flight, a departure city, a destination city, and the according latitude and longitude. So if you want to start developing a mods, there are some prerequisites. So of course you need to have access to a Spotfire environment. In this demo, I'm using the TIBCO Cloud Spotfire environment. And you can go directly to cloud.tibco.com and click on try now if you want to have to request for an evaluation of this product. Of course, you also need a code editor, and you need Node.js installed, because the examples that are available on GitHub use Node.js to start the development server. So once you have Spotfire open and you have loaded some data in it, how do you create a mod? So it's really simple. You just go to the tools menu, and under development, you click on this item, create a visualization mod. And from there, everything is explained. You simply have to follow the steps and procedures that are described. So from there, you have a link to the documentation where you can find, I'll have an introduction on the mods API, or you can also access directly the API and all the objects that are available in the API. And the other link that you will find in this create visualization mod dialog is a link to the GitHub repo where we have published some examples for you to start with. So the example that I'm going to use for creating my mod is this one, Gsdf starter, because it's really a kind of skeleton. It's the simple example that you will find in this set of examples. And that's the one I use because there are less lines to modify to have something achievable. So from these examples, here, as I said, I'm going to use the Gsdf starter example. And that's the structure of the example. So you have a .vs code folder, which is used to store configuration of the Visual Studio Code IDE, which I'm using here. There is a Spotfire folder, which contains some metadata and the API. And then there is the SRC folder, which is where you are going to work. And in this folder, there are 3 files that are really of importance. So first, the mod-manifest.json file. It's a file where you will define some metadata on your mod. So you will be able to define here things like the name of your mod. So for instance, here we are going to call it network chart. I'm going to change also the ID. And then other things that are more important. So you can here define some properties if you want to store some configuration directly within your mod. And most importantly, there is this data view definition object, which defines all the axes that we are going to use in the mod. So in the example, there are axes that are already existing. So there is the color axis. This one we are going to leave it as it is. And we are simply going to modify the axes that we have here, because in my case, I need more axes that are currently defined. So I'm going to remove all the information that is not needed in my example, and start from scratch. The one thing I will need to prepare my data is an axis which is going to get the type of the row. When you define an axis, there you have to define the mod that is going to be used for this axis. And here you have 3 possibilities. So one is categorical, which means what you are going to set on that axis represents a measure or a dimension, sorry, not a measure. And Spotfire will group data by the column that you set on this axis. And then you have 2 other modes. Continuous means you are going to create an axis that will contain some measures, so some aggregations that are computed by Spotfire before data is sent to your mod. And then finally, there is this dual mode, which means your axis can be both either a categorical one or a continuous. So for the tab here, I'm going to use the categorical mode because I want Spotfire to differentiate between rows that correspond to an airport and rows that correspond to a flight. So I'm doing this with this categorical axis, and Spotfire will automatically group data on this axis and send to my mod an aggregated view of my data. And then I have other axes that I will need in my mod. So I want to be able to create links between the airports that I have in my graphic visualization. And for these links, I need to provide to my mod the departure and the destination. So which is going to correspond to the departure city and destination city columns that are in my data table. And finally, I want also to provide to my mod the latitude and longitude for the airport so that I can position them correctly in the network chart. And then I also created a size by axis, which I'm going to use to determine the thickness of the links that are linking the airports to each other. And here you can notice that for this size by, I'm using a continuous axis, which means from the UI, Spotfire will let me choose whatever aggregation method I want for this axis. So that's the first thing you need to do when you start creating a mod, is modifying this mod manifest, and then the rest depends on the API that you are going to use for the visualization. So here I'm going to use Cytoskip. So first I need to import it in my project, and from there it's working the same way as any other web development project. So from your HTML, you need to load the script. So here I'm going to load the Cytoskip library. When you do that, keep in mind that in mod there is a security mechanism. So your mod is running in a sandbox iframe. So there say access to external resources is prohibited and is blocked by Spotfire to make things more secure. So when you are accessing external resources, don't forget to add the domains you want to access in the mod manifest under this external resources property. So I've loaded my Cytoskip library, and now I need to initialize my Cytoskip framework. And for doing this, I need to modify this main.js file. And here you will notice that there is already some code in this file that serves as a skeleton. From there, you will notice that there is an initialize method which provides you access to a mod object. And from this mod object, you can create what we call in the Spotfire Mods jargon, a reader. It's a convenient method for synchronizing the reading of multiple data or information. When you have a visualization that needs to be re-rendered, when there is a change in the window size, for instance, in the data view or in a document property in Spotfire, then you can use a reader to synchronize and call back only when at least one of these item has changed. So by default, in the GS dev starter example, there is a reader that is created, which is going to listen to any change in the data view, which means if we are changing the marking in another visualization, if we are changing the columns in the axis, or if we are applying some filters, the data view is going to be modified, and then that's going to trigger a re-render of the mod. We are also listening to changes in the window size. So if I for instance magnify the mod, then the mod is going to be re-rendered, and listening to the change in the window size will let me to re-render or fit the content of the visualization to the new size of the window. And finally, in this example, we are also listening to a change in the mod property that is defined in the manifest. Then so this reader is created, and then we subscribe to this reader and we provide a code back that is called when at least one of the readables in the reader has changed. And here we are calling a function called render, and that's the function that is available already here in the example. In this example, in this function, so there are already a few lines that show you how you can control that there is no error, and also control that you have actually some data defined or some columns defined in the axis before doing the actual rendering. So we can leave this part as it is, and we are going to simply modify the rest of this on this function to call the Cytoskip to first transform our data, and then call the Cytoskip functions to render the graph. So the first thing that I need to do is to create the nodes and edges that Cytoskip is expecting as an input. So if I go back to the cytoskip.org website, in the documentation, you can see that Cytoskip is expecting a list of elements, and these elements you have a mix of nodes and edges. The nodes, there is at least one required parameter, which is an ID. And for the edges, there are at least two parameters that are mandatory, which is the source and target, which corresponds to the nodes that are also defined in these elements array. That's what I'm going to create here. So I'm creating an elements array and iterating over these rows, the rows in my data view. So I'm retrieving here the data view, and in this data view, I can access all the rows, and I'm iterating over these rows. And for each row, I want to retrieve a number of values based on the axis that I have defined in the manifest. So here, for instance, I'm going to retrieve the type from the type axis. So this axis is a categorical axis. So I'm using here a function called categorical. It's easy to remember for retrieving this kind of axis, this type of axis. And then I'm retrieving the formatted value. Same thing for the departure and destination axis, which are both categorical as well. And then here I'm retrieving all the continuous axes that I've defined in my manifest. So the size by axis, which I'm going to use to size to define the thickness of the edges, the latitude and the longitude, and also the color axis that is defined in my manifest by default, which I didn't touch. And I'm going to use this color to color the nodes and edges in my network chart. So once I've retrieved all these values, I can apply whatever logic I want. So in our case, I'm going to distinguish the type. If the type of the row in my data view is equals to flight, that means the row corresponds to a flight. In this case, in my network chart, it's going to correspond to an edge between two airports. So I'm going to add this row in my elements array, and then for Cytoskip, I'm creating an object in the group edges with some data, and here I can find the source and target that Cytoskip expects when you are defining an edge, and then also adding some data. So with the value of the size by axis, and finally the color. If the type is not a flight, then it's airport, and then I'm going to create a node, and I'm going to specify as an ID the name or the value that I have in the departure axis. And you can see here that I'm also passing the position for this node. And here I'm calling a function to convert the latitude and longitude to X and Y offsets based on the Mercator principle. And this function, I'm going to add it as well in my main.js file. So from there, I have everything for my mod to work. And each of the examples come with a set of NPM tasks, which are useful to start a web development, well, a web server, which is going to serve all these resources so that Spotfire can access them. So here, if I launch this npm run start command, it's launching a web server, and you can see that here on which port it has been started. And then from Spotfire, so still in my create visualization mode dialog, I can connect to this development server, and Spotfire will automatically read all the files in my project, all the files that are saved by this development server. So it's going to read the mod manifest, and from the mod manifest, Spotfire is able to determine which axes are available in my mod. And here you can see that for each of the axes that I've defined in the manifest, Spotfire has automatically generated some controls to let the user change the configuration of this axis. So here it has also, there is a kind of AI that runs and is able to guess and automatically fill this axis. So here you can see that the type is already set. For the departure axis, I'm going to use departure city. Same thing here for the destination is going to be the destination city. For the latitude, so I'm going to use the latitude. And here, as it's a continuous axis, you can see that Spotfire automatically gives me the ability to define an aggregation method. So here, there's no point in calculating the average latitude or longitude. So I'm going to use simply the first value in the data view. And from there, and oops, there's something not working. So as any other web app, you can access the common web development tools to help you diagnose the what's going wrong. So in this case, let me just reset here this axis. And I think that's probably something. So let me just stop this one. I'll simply take the that's the demo effect, right? That's what we call the demo effect. So still going to use my backup. So I'm going to reconnect. And here I have the correct output. So here you can see that for all the airports, so I've created a node in my graph, and I've used the latitude and longitude to position these airports in the graph. And you can see here that the rows are the edges, sorry, between the airports are sized by the number of rows in my data table, which corresponds to the number of flights. And it's also colored by the number of flights. So obviously here we can see easily that Atlanta is the airport which is the most frequented. If I wanted to analyze this data in a different axis, like for instance, I want to analyze which airline can do the junction between two airports, then I can change the configuration of this axis. So like here to represent, instead of the number of flights, which airlines arrive or depart from specific airport. And here you can see that my mode is automatically linked to the other visualizations in Spotfire. So if I change the marking in another visualization, like this one, which represents a distribution of the airlines, the mode is re-rendered automatically with the corresponding data. So just to highlight the marking here. Or wanted to remove all the other airlines and take only the airlines which is selected by the user in other visualizations. Then I can use for this the limit by marking, and then it's updating the mode. So that's done for the mod. So once you are happy with your mod, you can disconnect from the development server, and from there you can save it to the library so that it's shared with other users. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm just going to save the mod. And finally, every user that has access to this mod will be able to see it directly in this visualization flyout. And all the users will still have the possibility to search for new visualizations or new mods in the Spotfire library. So that's what I have here. So I'm done for the demo. So Magnus, it's over to you.
Yeah. Thanks, Bruno. So I just have a one of few wrap-up slides. Okay. So so just to summarize, so we showed you a bit of how you can use Spotfire as a platform to build your custom analytic apps, and with Spotfire Mods, you're able to add any specialized graphics you want, built with modern web technologies. And just the final shout out to you. This is now, you're now opening up the community for external submissions. So we'll soon see a few mods from a couple of Spotfire customers, but anyone can try this out and contribute to the community. So that's what's all of this presentation, and now we're open for questions. I guess I'll leave it
Excellent.
to you.
Yeah, Bruno, Magnus, thank you so much for the presentation, and I can wait to see what the attendees will be able to do with mods today.